I'll watch. Yeah.
Okay. So income method we have already discussed, and expenditure method we have to do. Okay. So in expenditure method, as I discussed in the last class also, that if we look at the process of the whole production activity that goes on in the economy, so firms do the production, and for production they require factor services for which they give factor payments. So it will generate income for the households. When the household have got the income, they will buy goods and services, and thus they will do expenditure, which will again lead to further production, and the economy goes on. Okay, this is how the economy function. Production occurs, income generation occurs, expenditure occurs. So for production, we have discussed the method called value added method, which Tanvi you had missed. So I will be doing it in a separate class with you. Don't worry about it. We will cover this. Income method we discussed previously, for which we did some numericals also. So it is done. Today we have to start with the expenditure method. Okay. So for expenditure method, I will draw a simple flow chart that we have to calculate. We have to start with calculation of GDP. GDP MP. We'll start with the calculation of GDP MP. Now, how this GDP MP is calculated? GDP MP is calculated by adding four things. We will be adding four things. First is PFCE, which stands for private final consumption expenditure. To this, as I told you, we need four things. We will add GFCE, which stands for government final consumption expenditure. I'll tell you what are these. Abhi, you just note down. Okay, I'll tell you what are these and how to identify. Generally, in your question, numericals, they will be given as it is. But still, if you want to identify how you can identify these, I'll tell you what are these. The third item, as I told you, we need four items. The third item is gross domestic capital formation. Gross domestic capital formation. So this is gross domestic capital formation. And lastly, to add to this, we have got net exports. Net export. These are the four things. Okay. Net export is X minus N. X stands for exports. and M stands for imports. So let us come back to this PFCE, private final consumption expenditure. What is this? This is basically the expenditure done by the households on buying goods and services. To live our life, we need clothing, we need food, we need shelter, we need so many things. है ना? We need transportation. All the goods and services that we buy. Okay. There are various services like schooling, like hospital, like restaurants, like hotels. Okay. Like air tickets, like train tickets, bus travel. There are various things that we buy. So it is the sum total of all the expenditure done by the households in the country. Now we come to GFCE, Government Final Consumption Expenditure. Now what is this? Government Final Consumption Expenditure is basically the expenditure done by government on buying various goods and services to provide its services to the people, to the citizens of the country. Government also provide a lot of services to the citizens. To provide those services, like they provide defense services, they provide police by maintaining law and order, है ना? They provide a lot of services. They do street lighting, they put up traffic lights, they do a lot of things. And to provide all these services, like they run government hospitals, they run government schools, they run government ration shops, so many things government is doing. They are for irrigation, they are putting up canals, they are building dams, they are putting power lines, they are building ports, airports, so many different things they are doing. So whatever government, okay, whatever government is buying for giving its services to the citizens, the expenditure done by the government on those things will be covered under government financial consumption expenditure. For this private final consumption expenditure, I must add that it will also include the expenditure done by the firms for buying various goods and services. Private final consumption expenditure will include both the expenditure done by the households as well as the firms, both private firms. Here firms means private firms, not government organization. Whatever government organization are making expenditure, it will be covered under GFCE, Government Final Consumption Expenditure. Then comes gross domestic capital formation. Okay. Now what is this? It is combination of two things. One is called as, it is combination of two things. One is called as gross fixed capital formation. Gross fixed capital formation, and it also includes change in stock. So it includes these two things. Okay. Now, what is gross fixed capital formation? Let me explain this. It is the assets, the fixed assets created in the country. Okay. There are some factories being built. There is some machinery being set up. Whatever capital is being created. What is capital? These are those goods which are used for doing production, like factories, like machinery. The assets which are used for doing production is called as capital, creating a capital. If I build a factory, it will be a capital investment. If I put up machineries in the factory, it will be a capital investment. Okay. So gross fixed capital. Gross means, gross, as I told you, it includes depreciation. Gross means includes depreciation. So it includes depreciation. Okay. Is this clear? Now the fourth item for calculating, because first we have to calculate GDP MP and then we will go to national income from here. We also include net exports, which is exports of the country minus imports of the country. What are we are selling to the rest of the world and what are we buying from rest of the world? The difference of the value of the two things will give us the net export. Are you people clear on this thing? Tanvi, were you able to understand, listen to this? Vedika?
Yes, sir, it's clear.
Clear, great. Okay. Right. So by adding these four things, what we will get is GDP MP. Okay. And then what we do is we go for GDP to NNP FC because we have to find out national income. So now we have to find out NNP FC. What we have found out is GDP MP. GDP MP. So from gross, we have to go to net. So for going from gross to net, we subtract depreciation. From domestic, we have to go to national. So to go to national from domestic, we add NFIA, net factor income from abroad. Net factor income from abroad. It is the net income that we get from rest of the world. From MP, we have to go to FC. So for going from MP to FC, we have to subtract net indirect taxes. Indirect taxes is taxes which are charged on goods and services, like GST, that is indirect taxes. Net indirect taxes is basically indirect taxes minus subsidies. The free services that government give to people is called as subsidies. Okay. So this is how we will obtain our national income. This NNPFC is national income. I hope the method is clear.
Yes.
Tanvi, what about you? Is it clear? Okay. So let us start with doing some questions on this. Let me give you a question. You try it out and then I'll do it for you. Okay, so this is the question. You have to find GDP MP from the values that are given to you. Try this question. As we have discussed up there, let us put it into perspective. Let me take this question, the arrow itself, along with the formulas. So let us look what we have. First, we have to find out GDP-MP. For this, we need private final consumption expenditure. We have private final consumption expenditure here. We also need government final consumption expenditure. We have government final consumption expenditure. Okay. Then we need gross domestic capital formation, which is combination of gross fixed capital formation and change in stock. So gross fixed capital formation is given to us and change in stock is also given to us. So if we add these two, we will get gross domestic capital formation. So third thing is also available to us. Then we need net exports. Net export is exports minus imports. Okay. So if we subtract these two, then we can find out net exports. So let us work this out. Okay. GDP MP will be equal to first plus second plus third plus fourth. This will give us GDP, this will give us gross domestic capital formation because it is sum of gross fixed capital formation and change in stock. And then net exports, which is sixth minus imports, which is fifth. Okay. So this is 1200 plus 200 plus 300 plus 400, that is 700 plus 600 minus 500, that is 100. Okay. So GDP will come out to be what will be the GDP?
2200.
Yeah. 1200 plus 200, 1400 plus 700 plus 800, 800. 1400 plus 800 will be 2200. So 2200 is the GDP-MP. GDP-MP. Now we have to find out what in this question? GDP-MP only. So our answer is there. Okay. Okay. So what is your question in this? What is your question?
So how to calculate gross domestic capital formation?
Look, you have been given private final consumption expenditure. You have been given government final consumption expenditure. You are asking for gross
Gross.
domestic capital formation. Gross domestic capital formation. Right? GDP-FC. अच्छा, इसमें what you need to do is that it is sum of two things. Gross domestic fixed capital formation and change in stock. For finding out change in stock, what you need to do is closing stock minus opening stock. Okay. Closing stock minus opening stock. That is change. Which is, in this case, 100 minus 60, which is 40. Another thing for gross domestic capital formation is gross domestic fixed capital formation. You need to add to this. With this, you need to add gross domestic fixed capital formation, but you have been given net domestic fixed capital formation. So you need to add depreciation to this net domestic, because it is net, you need to add to it depreciation. So what is depreciation? Consumption of fixed capital is another name for depreciation. This consumption of fixed capital is depreciation only. Depreciation. Okay. So you add depreciation to net domestic fixed capital formation. If you add depreciation to it, what you will get is gross domestic fixed capital formation. Fixed capital formation. Okay. Which means this plus change in stock. Plus change in stock will give you gross domestic capital formation. So let us calculate this. This is 350. And depreciation is, that is consumption of fixed capital is 50. So plus 50. So what you get is 400. Add to this 400 change in stock, which is 40. So plus 40. So what you get is 440, which is gross domestic capital formation, 440. So you have private final consumption expenditure, you have government final consumption expenditure, you have gross domestic capital formation. 3 items you have. Now you need net exports. Net exports is given to you. Net export is given to you. Even though they have given imports, we don't need to consider because net export is already given to us. So first find GDP-MP. GDP-MP, which is private final consumption expenditure, which is given to us 1500, plus government final consumption expenditure, which is given to us as 200, plus gross domestic capital formation, which we just calculated as 440, plus net exports. Net exports is given to us, which is minus 10. Okay. So you just calculate this 1500 plus 640 is 2140 minus 10. So it will come out to be 2130. Any questions, Vidika, up till here?
No, sir.
Okay. Now this is GDP MP. From GDP MP, you have to go to GNPFC. So what we need to find is G N P GNP GNPFC. What we have already calculated is GDP MP. GDP So G to G, no change, it's same. From domestic to national, we have to make a change. So for going from domestic to national, we need to add NFIA. NFIA. And from MP to FC, we have to go from MP to FC. We need to add, we need to subtract net and indirect taxes minus NIT, net indirect taxes. Okay. So NFIA is given to us, which is this 10th point, net factor income from abroad. GDP MP we have already calculated 2300. So sorry, 2130, not 2300, 2130. 2130. NFIA is minus 30. So I put up minus 30 here. NIT, net indirect taxes, it is given to us, which is 40. So we need to subtract this 40 also. So from 2130, if we subtract 30, I get 2100. From that, if I subtract 40, what will I get? 2040. So it will be 2060, not 2040, 2060. 2060. Okay. 2060 rupees crores. This unit has to be written. Don't never miss this. Whatever values they are given, a unit. So this is your answer. This is the third question. Now, please try this third question now. So in this question, we have to find out GDP FC. But first, we will be finding GDP MP. GDP MP, which is private final consumption expenditure plus government final consumption expenditure plus gross domestic capital formation for which you have been given net domestic capital formation, you will have to add depreciation to it. Depreciation is consumption of fixed capital. So if you add this to this, okay, we will get what? Gross domestic capital formation. We don't need to add change in stock in this case because they have not given you net domestic fixed capital formation. They have not given you this. हो गई गलती? किसकी हुई है ये गलती? किसी ने करी? हो गई ना ये गलती?
Yes, sir.
हाँ, ये हो जानी थी क्योंकि इन्होंने ग्रॉस क्या दिया हुआ है? नेट डोमेस्टिक कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन दिया हुआ है। इन्होंने नेट डोमेस्टिक फिक्स कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन नहीं दिया। जब आपको फिक्स कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन दिया होगा तब आपको चेंज इन स्टॉक ऐड करना है। ओके, क्या है? ग्रॉस डोमेस्टिक कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन विच इज नेट डोमेस्टिक फिक्स्ड कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन प्लस चेंज इन स्टॉक। सो विच मीन्स आपके पास नेट डोमेस्टिक फिक्स कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन है और चेंज इन स्टॉक, इन दोनों को ऐड करोगे। बट यहां पर आपको नेट डोमेस्टिक कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन दिया हुआ है, यानी डोमेस्टिक कैपिटल तो दिया ही हुआ है, बस फर्क किस चीज का है? आपको चाहिए ग्रॉस, इन्होंने दिया हुआ है नेट। इतना तो दे ही रखा है, या ये नहीं दे रहा हुआ आपको कि नेट डोमेस्टिक फिक्स्ड कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन, ये फिक्स्ड है। यहाँ पे जो वर्ड एफ है ये फिक्स्ड के लिए है। नेट डोमेस्टिक फिक्स्ड कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन नहीं दिया हुआ आपको, आपको नेट डोमेस्टिक कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन दिया हुआ है। अगर फिक्स्ड होता है तब आप इसको चेंज इन स्टॉक ऐड करके डोमेस्टिक कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन में कन्वर्ट करते हो। तो आपको तो नेट से ग्रॉस में जाना है, विच मीन सिंपली इसमें आपको डेप्रिसिएशन ऐड करना है, यानी नेट डोमेस्टिक कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन में डेप्रिसिएशन ऐड करना है। और फिर आपको चाहिए इसके अंदर, फिर आपको चाहिए इसके अंदर आपको चाहिए इसके अंदर क्या चाहिए? और नेट एक्सपोर्ट्स, हाँ, और चाहिए आपको नेट एक्सपोर्ट। चार चीजें चाहिए होती है ना, तीन हो गई ना हमारी। ठीक है, तो सबसे पहले प्राइवेट फाइनल कंजम्पशन एक्सपेंडिचर, वो 800 है, वो लिख लिया हमने, प्लस गवर्नमेंट फाइनल कंजम्पशन एक्सपेंडिचर वो 450 दिया हुआ है, वो लिख लिया हमने, प्लस ग्रॉस डोमेस्टिक कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन चाहिए, दिया आपको नेट डोमेस्टिक कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन है जो कि 150 है, वो तो ले ही लेंगे हम, और उसमें हम ऐड करेंगे डेप्रिसिएशन, नेट से ग्रॉस में चला जाएगा, तो ये 50 ऐड कर दिया हमने इसमें। ठीक है, प्लस हमें नेट एक्सपोर्ट चाहिए, वो दिया ही हुआ है -30। ये आपका आ गया जीडीपी एमपी। तो 800 प्लस 500 600 650, 800 plus 650 will give you 1450 minus 30 will give you 1420। ठीक है ना? ठीक करा मैं? ठीक किया मैंने यहां तक। सो 1420 ये आ गया, ये आपका जीडीपी एमपी आ गया। आई होप क्लियर है। मैंने सीधा वैल्यूज डाल दी हैं, बट आपको जो फॉर्मूलाज दिए ना उसके अकॉर्डिंग चलोगे। मेन इसमें जो लोचा था वो इस चीज का था, जो कंसेप्ट था इट वाज दिस। ओके, सो मेन थिंग वाज दिस। So you were given private final consumption expenditure, which was 800, you took here. You are given government final consumption expenditure, which is 450, you took it here. Then you needed gross domestic capital formation, GDCF. You were given net domestic capital. You were given NDCF. NDCF. Okay. You were given net. So if you add depreciation to net, depreciation is what? This is depreciation, consumption of fixed capital. If you add this, so we added these two. This is your gross domestic capital formation. Because 150 was net, you added 50, which is depreciation to it. So net converted into gross. And minus net exports. Minus 30 is net export. So you get GDP MP. But you need now what? GDP FC. So to get GDP FC from GDP MP, GDP MP, GDP MP. So gross is same, domestic is same, product is same. MP to FC we have to go. So you need to subtract net indirect taxes, NIT. Net indirect taxes. So what you get is GDP FC. FC is equal to 1420. Net indirect taxes is 120 minus 120. So you get 1300 as your answer. So unit is rupees 1300 crores. I hope this much is clear. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me give you next question. Now this question is little bit interesting. Let us do this question. You have to find out gross fixed capital formation from the given data. Gross fixed capital formation. Do it fast. I'm waiting. Do it fast. So the correct answer for this is 1150. Do it as homework and we'll discuss it in the next class.